We react differently to each other. The same situation might cause a very different reaction in me as it might in you. Something in our house at the moment which is causing a very different reaction in me to the other people that live in my household. Marmite. Marmite historically had the advertising slogan, you either love it or you hate it. I think if I had to choose, I would be on the hate side. It's not that offensive. If a bit is on my knife and I butter my toast with it, it's not the end of the world. I don't mind it in a casserole or something as stock, but I would never choose to have it. So I probably am on the hate side. Marmite has been accelerated in our house with the advent of something called Marmite porridge, which is something my family seem to eat every breakfast, which is normal porridge, but with Marmite swirled into it. And this I find deeply offensive for some reason. And we've got little kids, so I need to usually try some to check it's not too hot for them. And actually, I can't even lick a tiny bit of this Marmite porridge because it just spoils my breakfast. Whereas everyone else in my household is loving it and will eat bowls of the stuff. We react differently to things. One situation might cause me to react differently to someone else. And in our story today, we've got two women, sisters, Mary and Martha, who react differently to the same situation. And Jesus meets them both in their different reactions. We're looking at John chapter 11, and the chapter starts by explaining that Lazarus, their brother, you've got Martha and Mary and their brother Lazarus, three siblings. Their brother Lazarus is ill, and he's so ill they need Jesus to come and heal him. He's not going to get better on his own. So they send for Jesus. Jesus doesn't come immediately. And actually, by the time Jesus does get to their house, Lazarus has died. Now, I actually spoke on this exact same chapter of the Bible just 6 weeks ago. And I have to say, this story looks really different to me now than it did 6 weeks ago when we were meeting as Pattern Church in the platform. It feels like a very long time ago. And it feels really different because not just a Mary and Martha in mourning, but it feels like our whole nation, almost our whole world really, is in mourning. We're experiencing this collective grief at the moment. Some of us are mourning precious loved ones who have died or are very ill. Some of us are mourning our connection with each other. We might be mourning our routine. We might be mourning what work used to look like. Maybe we're not working, maybe we're working in a different way. Some of us are grieving stuff that hasn't even happened yet, hasn't even occurred, stuff we don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know how this is going to progress, what life's going to look like into the future. And that's really challenging for our mental well-being, our health, brings up loads of fear and anxiety, grieving in anticipation, they call it, before it's even happened. We're sort of experiencing the loss of it before it's even happened. And you might have found that you're not reacting in the way that you normally react to stuff. Marmite, you either love it or you hate it. This, I have no idea how I'm going to react to something very ordinary tomorrow because it's affecting me so badly. And this story looks different when I'm surrounded by so much grief to how it did 6 weeks ago. And we have different situations, different reactions to the same situation. Jesus meets Martha and Mary in this story, and they actually say the same words to him. In a moment, we'll hear them both say, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." They've got this disappointment that Jesus didn't come in time to heal their brother, and he has died. They are grieving and they're disappointed. But apart from that one phrase, the rest of their interactions with Jesus, the rest of their responses to Jesus are very, very different to each other. I'm cautious to put a label on them because we only hear a really small snapshot into their experience in this story, but they're so different, and I do like a label. So I've sort of labelled them. Martha, maybe if you like a label, has more of a head reaction to the situation, and Mary has more of a heart reaction to the situation. We're going to start with Martha, and we're going to read from verse 21. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." Now, Martha's known elsewhere in the Bible for her like practical, kind of pragmatic response to situations. And here she has quite a deep discussion. Her brother's been dead 4 days, and she's ready for some big theology, some big concepts of life and death and resurrection. She says to Jesus, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Belief in the resurrection, what we might talk now of heaven, was really common in Bible times. Lots of the Jewish people, the people that follow God, believed that this life was not the end, this death was not the end. They'd rise again with God on the last day. I'm an Anglican priest. Part of my role is I have the privilege of walking with families as they get ready for their loved ones' funerals. And the hope of heaven for so many people today, as was 2,000 years ago, is so important. People talk about their loved one being reunited with a spouse or a sibling who's died previously, who they missed so much. They might think about them being at peace, their pain being over. They might think about them being in a good place, being with God, perhaps, if they've got faith in God. And Martha was ready to think about this stuff. She had this like theological sort of pragmatic response to it. And Jesus meets her in that. She's ready to talk about life, even in the face of death. And Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. She's got it right. There is hope, even in this difficult situation she's facing. And the hope is found in Jesus. Jesus meets her. Her hope is found in him. She meets her in the sort of head thinking response that she has. And Jesus can meet us when we have a kind of head response, questions and theories, and we want to practically know what's happening in a difficult situation. I have a friend called Val, and when I first met her, she would say she believed in God, but she felt that you weren't allowed to be a Christian unless you were living a perfect life. And her daughter, who'd been coming to church before her, became a Christian, got baptized. And she loved her daughter. They got on really, really well. But she looked at her daughter's life and said, that is not a perfect life. How can you become a Christian when you're not living a perfect life? It didn't make sense to her. She had a lot of questions. She had a head reaction to this situation that she found herself in. What was Christianity all about then? How can you become a Christian when you're not living a perfect life? Val came on Alpha with us. And Jesus met her with her questions, with her wonderings, with her confusion, with her sort of head thinking response to the situation. And she met with Jesus, and Jesus met her with the truth that actually he's all about forgiveness and all about love and all about loving us, not because we deserve it or because we live perfect lives, but actually he loves us because he loves us. We need him and he's with us. She actually became a Christian having done Alpha with us. And then we baptized her later in the year. Super exciting story of a mum and daughter coming to faith, Jesus meeting them where they were at. And if you've got questions today, Jesus will meet you in those questions. If you've got answers that you're looking for, steps that you want to take, he'll meet you in that place. So that's Martha with more of a head response. But Mary has more of a heart response. We're going to read from verse 32. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? Mary has a very different response. She falls at Jesus' feet, it says, slightly earlier than that, and she's weeping. She's right in the thick of her grief. She's not thinking about life after death or theology or big questions of life. She's not there. She's in the middle of all these difficult, grieving, mourning feelings. And Jesus weeps. Verse 35, Jesus wept. That's Jesus' response to her. And it's like a definite action. He almost like he burst into tears. He's mourning his friend. He loves Lazarus. He loves Mary and Martha. But also there's more. He's deeply moved in spirit. He's troubled by the situation. Maybe there's a sense of outrage in there. Maybe an anger at death and pain and the suffering that these people and so many more people that he will meet every day are experiencing. And it pours out of him in his tears. And for us, I think we need to remember that whilst Jesus is the resurrection and the life, he's stronger than death. His power is more powerful than anything we can face. I think sometimes we also need to remember that he is human. He is like you and me. He came to earth as a man and walked among people just like us. He had experiences just like we do. He felt those feelings of pain and grief and loss. We see other times when Jesus has an emotional response in the Bible. We see one other time when he cries. There's two that's written in the Bible. There may well be more time where he's reduced to tears by seeing something that touches him deeply. We see anger. We see sadness. We often see compassion. He's moved to help people because of compassion. That feeling, suffering with someone, is what compassion means. And because Jesus cried is the title of our talk today. Because he cried, we can know that he feels our feelings with us. When we're having a heart response, he's with us in it, just like he was with Mary in it, feeling her feelings and so much more, the unjustness, the wrongness of all this pain that he's experiencing. Me and my husband Andy are doing the marriage course at the moment. We're doing it online, and marriage course is 7 sessions designed to help you strengthen your marriage. And we're in every evening at the moment. So we thought, great opportunity for us to do 7 evenings of the marriage course. And this week we had a little exercise to do, which was about good listening. So we had to think of a sort of trivial but real example to practice on, a time where I didn't necessarily feel like Andy, my husband, was feeling my feelings or appreciating my feelings, and I was given an opportunity to share them with him, and then he had to listen well to me. And it turns out the thing that I, in that moment, realised that I was feeling is in the last 4 weeks, I've had a lot more opinions and feelings about dishwasher filters. I didn't have any opinions about dishwasher filters before 4 weeks ago, but that is one of the things I now feel strongly about. It turns out that the dishwasher filters in our dishwasher only seem to get cleaned by me, and that's challenging on a number of levels. And so my husband Andy listened mostly with a straight face. He did pretty well about me pouring out my feelings about these dishwasher filters. He then reflected back to me what I'd feeling just to make sure that he heard my feelings correctly. And then he helped me ascertain what the really important part of this situation was for me, and what I'd love to see a resolution, how I'd love to see things move forward, and what we could do together to work on this situation about the dishwasher filters not being cleaned. He did very well. Very good reflective listening techniques. And I felt so listened to and understood and valued and cared for about these dishwasher filters. But Jesus does not need reflective listening techniques. He's fully human. He's been there. Jesus cried. He's felt our feelings. He knows what it's like to be us. And also more than that, he is God. He is fully God. He's known us since before we were born. He loves us more than we can imagine. He knows how we're feeling before we've even had to say it. He knows how we're feeling. My friend Lizzie has just written a book about her experience of grief through her experience of miscarriage and childlessness, working out what life looks like when she's not having the children that she had hoped for. And maybe you've got friends in a similar situation, or maybe that's part of your story. And she writes in her book about how all the losses she was experiencing, so many different losses, were confusing and overwhelming and painful, and her head reactions and her heart reactions were messy and yucky and hard to get a handle on. And she writes about, amongst many other things, how letting God into her pain has been so much more helpful than trying to carry on ignoring those feelings, ignoring those questions, ignoring the effect, the response we're having to the situation. I think it's been a really hard journey, and it's lifelong bringing our difficult feelings to God. But it's been so helpful for me to hear her story over the years that I've known her, as she's really brave and lets God into her feelings. It's helped me to feel some of my feelings of loss and grief and disappointment as well. I'm so grateful to her. Jesus meets Lizzie where she's at. He meets me where I'm at. He meets you where you're at. He meets Mary in this story where she's at with her heart response, these big feelings. Jesus weeps. And because Jesus cried, he can meet us too when we're having a heart response, a feeling response to a situation. I'm going to read the end of the story, reading from verse 38, and I'll read 2 little sections from this part of the story, because Martha and Mary's grief is not the end of this story. So verse 38, Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. And then later it says, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth round his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." The story doesn't end with Mary and Martha in their grief, in their sadness. Jesus performs a miracle, an amazing, hopeful, joyful miracle. And our grief may not end as miraculously as this story. This season will end. We don't know what that's going to look like, but it will end. But Jesus is the resurrection and the life. That's what he promises, whether we experience miraculous healings for everything we pray for or just some of the things that we pray for at this time. He's the resurrection and the life. He is hope embodied. And this story of Lazarus coming out of the tomb, a big stone being rolled away, death being defeated, can't not remind us of the story we celebrated last week, the Easter story, where Jesus, having died, having taken all our pain and all our suffering and all our hurts and the things that stop us living life to the full, stop us from living life in closeness with God, he took them on himself on the cross. He died because he loves us so much. He was put in the grave, and on the third day, the stone had been rolled away, death was defeated, and Jesus was alive again. We can have hope because Jesus is the resurrection and the life. What we're experiencing now is not the end of the story. Jesus has got more for us than that. Hope now, life now, and hope in the future, life everlasting with him. He's not just familiar with our suffering and pain, he's taken it on himself. He's died for us, he's risen again. He meets us where we're at, in our head stuff, in our heart stuff. He knows us, he loves us, he's with us. And because Jesus cried, we can know him with us in our pain, in our grief, in our challenge. Let's make ourselves available for him to meet us, available to be met by Jesus, available for him. I wonder how you're going to make yourself available for Jesus this week. Are you someone who tends to respond with your head? That's me usually. Maybe you've got questions, like Joel said earlier. We'd love for you to join us on Alpha in 10 days. Our Alpha course online is starting in the morning and in the evening. Go to our website, pattonchurch.org/alpha, and sign up. We'll send you all the details of how to connect with us, Alpha Online. It's a great place to ask questions. Jesus meets people in their questions, in their needs, in their wondering, in those practical things, the things that we're thinking about at the moment. Or maybe you want to read your Bible a little bit more. We're working through John's Gospel as a church. We've made it to chapter 11. And we're doing little reflections every day as well as our Sunday morning talks on John's Gospel. And you'd be so welcome to join us, to read God's word together, to let God meet us in what we're thinking about, in what we're processing, so we can get to know him better, allow him to meet with us where we're at. Maybe you've got a lot of feelings at the moment. Maybe you've got a lot of feelings that you're not expecting. It's not how you normally respond to stuff. It's okay to feel those feelings. Jesus is with you in those feelings. Maybe you want to write them down, get a journal, find a notebook, write some of them down. If you're creative, you might want to paint them out or poem them out or write a song, or I don't know what creative people do to get their feelings out, but express those feelings, help you process those feelings. Let Jesus into those feelings. Maybe there's someone that you could talk to who could help you think through what you're feeling. Practice some of that good listening that Andy and I are learning about this week. Or maybe you don't know how you respond. Maybe you don't know if your head or if your heart or if you're somewhere in between. You've no idea how you're feeling. You're completely confused. And actually, life is just really tough at the moment. And it's difficult to even articulate what's going on. And maybe you just need a bit of space. Maybe you need some space. Maybe you need to stop some things, if that's possible. I know some of us are working super hard at the moment. It's not possible to stop. But when you can, stop. Let God in to what you're experiencing. Let God meet you in your experience of this difficult season that we're in. Maybe you need to go for a walk, but leave your phone at home rather than taking your earphones or your whatever's on your phone. Just go for a walk without your phone. Go for a walk and get some space from the constancy of life. Maybe you need to sit and do nothing. And when your mind wanders, you let it come back to nothing. You clear your mind, actively sit and wait with Jesus. Maybe I've napped a lot this week, a lot. It's been great. I had a bit of space to just let my body process some of the stuff that's going on. Our bodies are under an onslaught at the moment of all this change and loss. Maybe we need to nap more, we need to rest more, we need to let Jesus into what we're experiencing. Just like Mary and Martha, we're grieving something, we're experiencing change and loss. It's very different to their experience, but it is still an experience that Jesus will meet us in. Our reactions are all different, but God will meet us wherever we're at. He knows us, he knows what we're like, he knows what this is like. And when he meets us, hope becomes possible, life becomes possible. This situation doesn't get the last word. Coronavirus does not get the last word on hope and on life and on joy and on peace and on how much God loves us and longs to be with us. Imagine what this week would look like for you if Jesus was with you. I wonder what this week would look like if some of those heavy things you're feeling or you're thinking, if Jesus took them from you, if you allowed Jesus to have them, to free yourself of them. I wonder what life would look like if Jesus who cried, who wept and mourned with his friends, but who is also resurrection and life, now and everlasting. Wonder what life would look like if he brought you some hope this week. My encouragement to you is to let God in. Let's make space for God today. Let's wait. Let's pause. Let's give him some of our thoughts, give him some of our feelings. Let's bring him into our head stuff, our heart stuff, our I don't know what stuff, and let's see what he does. Let's let him bring hope and joy. He is the resurrection and the life.